You are listening to Spilling the Tea, a real estate podcast with Kristy Macero and Shelagh Maychek.
Hi, everyone. You are listening to Spilling the Tea, a real estate podcast with myself, Kristy, and my lovely co-host, Shelagh Maychek.
Hello.
Today, we are sitting with an awesome agent. He has a voice for radio, but a face for real life. My brother-in-law, Chris Linden.
Thank you very much, Kristy. Happy October, everybody, and thanks for having me.
He's our only guest today because we are talking about some spooky content. It's not as spooky as our next episode that launches at the end of the month. That one's super spooky, almost content. Actually, it is content warning spooky.
Stigmas.
Very, very, very spooky. How many times can I say that word? We'll get a counter maybe.
Well, spooky.
Yes. So it is October. The subject warning here is all about death and contracts. It's something nobody talks about because it can be really uncomfortable. And there are other things that are scary in real estate, like dads coming to home inspections or, appraisals coming in short.
Oh.
Those are some horror stories too, but this is about the real deal, okay? Death and contracts is one of the D's of real estate that we promised we were going to bring you. And did you know that in every single contract, for every single real estate transaction, there is a segment that includes a portion about what happens if somebody dies? Now, if you're thinking, oh, I buy and sell all the time, I never have had this explained to me, chances are it has been explained to you, but it was put to you very gently because it's not a very sexy topic, okay? Because you don't want your realtor to be like, hey, do you love this house? Fantastic. Let's talk about your title rights in case you get hit by a bus.
Yeah.
Now, I've actually used that conversation with people because it generally lets people know that we are going to be talking about something serious, and I try to make it kind of lighter. But you just never know what's going to happen. Everybody dies at some point, and we do have to discuss it, unfortunately, especially with how big these assets are. But before we get into it, before we really scare you, before you shake in your seat, Shelagh.
Yeah.
Do you remember the very first time that we were informed during a transaction that somebody had passed away?
Yeah. My gut sank. I felt like really sad for the buyer. There were two buyers and one of them had passed away. And then I felt really anxious because we were representing the seller and they were in a position where they needed to sell that property. And I didn't know what was going to happen next because I had never come across it before. It was my first time. And I just kind of looked at you going, well, now what?
Yeah, we got a phone call. It was Saturday morning. The deposit check had literally gone in Friday night. And the agent that called said, hey, the buyer died. The right thing to do would be to give back the deposit check.
Subjects were already removed.
And I had to just be so corporate cold. And I was like, no, sorry, we will not be doing that.
Yeah.
And it was horrible. It was horrible. And I was so cold in that moment because I didn't, a lot of realtors, they have lots of history with their clients.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even like, oh, are you okay? I was like, no.
Yeah.
And it was a horrible feeling. And I remember, I was on the call to, you get the managing broker involved to make sure that everything is right. But it was right. Like that deal was considered done. Mm-hmm. So it was really tricky. Needless to say, Shelagh, you and I were actually at the gym. We were going to work out that morning and we didn't work out.
Yeah.
We didn't.
So you have to switch into protection mode for your seller, but you're human too. So you're like, wow, that is a really awful situation.
Yeah. So thankfully, after that initial conversation, shortly thereafter, I had another conversation with the real estate agent on the other side. And he said, oh, it's not a big deal. The son will take it over. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. There's lots of money in the estate. It's no problem.
Yeah.
So it all ended up being okay. But it got really awkward for a moment or two. So I wasn't too sure. Chris, when you started your career, I remember when you first started your career, I wanted you to get into real estate so bad because I knew you were going to be a rock star, and you have been. Okay, so you've proved me right. I'm so proud of you. And I remember one of your first kind of crazy situations, and that is why you're here today, because I would love for you to tell the story.
Yeah, it seems like so long ago, but like you said, I mean, I came into the industry with, some great help and training. Shadowed yourself and Shelagh for, a few months and basically saw how real estate worked and walked through it for, my first few transactions with you guys. And when it came to, get my own clients and get out there, with this particular situation you're talking about, it was actually my first deal for a buyer. So
That's a big deal.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was very serious about the due diligence process. There's certain, sources that realtors use, as you know. If you're buying a strata property for due diligence, you'll be reviewing the strata documents, the title, the property disclosure statement, and specifically within the strata documents, I'll just jump right into the story basically. The Form B is the one that we rely on the most, which is basically listing all of the facts that come with that property, which is
like a receipt almost.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it says, hey, your parking stall number is 32. Your storage locker number is 28. Your monthly strata fee is $421, and there is $0 owed to the strata. So sometimes somebody will just not pay for a strata fee, or they haven't paid for their special levy yet. That Form B will actually show the amount that's owed from the seller for whatever reason. So we rely on that as realtors to do our due diligence. So let's just say, hey, you know what? The buyers were super excited. We were getting a good deal on a property. The due diligence was, walk through with a fine-tooth comb. But yeah, I got a call on completion day, which is usually a behind-the-scenes type of day for the real estate agent. We've got them into a situation, the client, where basically the last thing is for the lawyers to transfer the funds to the seller, and the title will change hands and all of that kind of stuff. So
Generally, you're just waiting.
Yeah, so if you get a phone call, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing.
no, exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And since that deal, I've done approximately 100 deals, and the majority of those have always been very smooth on completion.
Yeah.
So this
It's not
one,
your first one.
Yeah. So this one
Sets
was
the tone forever.
yeah. So I got a call on completion day from the lawyer that was representing my client. And she just said, hey, we've got a bit of a problem here, Chris. The Strata Corporation has just informed us that the seller owes an amount for a payment that was for a restoration company. For whatever reason, it obviously didn't show up on the Form B, so there was no real way for you to know this.
Yeah.
Sometimes Form Bs are wrong, and no one ever talks about it.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes, Form Bs, we find that there's parking stalls that aren't allocated properly. There's
Yeah.
storage locker numbers that are wrong. Sometimes we get the whole wrong Form B for the wrong unit.
Yeah.
So I can believe that they missed this on the Form B.
Yeah. So
Which is frightening.
well, that's good to hear that at least it wasn't just me that
No,
happened to.
It happens.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Well, for this one, it was just a matter of the strata not having it on that specific document, so there was really no way for us to know that money was owed. What it came down to was obviously I asked a question to the lawyer, hey, do you know what that was for? Lawyer didn't know.
Yeah. You're like,
so-
restoration, that's odd.
Yeah, okay. So I know the floors had just been recently renovated and there was some updates done to the unit. Property disclosure statement was not filled out because the property wasn't lived in by the owner on title. It was, I believe, his mother that was living there. So the actual owner on title was the son. He never lived there. Property disclosure statement was crossed off. Long story short, I managed to get a hold of the strata management company, and we found out that it was for a restoration company that came in and ultimately removed a dead body. And well, I don't know if they removed the dead body, but they did the cleanup after the dead body.
Yeah, so coroner would have removed the body.
I
and
still
then-
get nervous even talking about it.
Yeah, so,
Triggered.
so this is something where there are companies that come into homes after and they do the hazmat cleanup because there's all kinds of indicators when maybe somebody's passed away in a unit and then maybe owners nearby are kind of seeing things, smelling things. And anytime you've got a fresh floor, you can assume that maybe things got a little soupy in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's very well put. We found out about the dead body situation. Obviously, it had been taken care of, other than the payment to the company. Somehow that didn't. I guess there might have been an argument between who was on the hook for that. Obviously, the strata wasn't going to be taking care of that because that's not a strata issue. That's within the unit.
How did you feel when you first, when you were told, when it dawned on you what it was for? How did you, because I mean, there's a lot of buyers out there that wouldn't be okay with that.
No, and that was my main concern right there. And I mean, yeah, just talking about it now, I even start to relive those emotions.
Yeah.
And like, yikes.
We're sorry.
But no, it was very it was a scary feeling. Obviously, as a realtor, we owe our clients, duty of full disclosure among many other things. So, I mean, my job is to tell them that immediately, but, the natural response is to worry about what the reaction is going to be.
Yeah.
At this point, I mean, they've already given the deposit. They're super excited about the property. And, I mean, I'm just hoping that it all goes well when I tell them.
Yeah.
So,
because at this point, this is hours away from title changing hands, essentially.
100%.
So the cool thing is that Chris is such a professional that he had a very, very, very good buyer's questionnaire that he had sent his clients, and he was able to reference it.
Well, that's the same buyer's questionnaire that you use in your business and ultimately showed me, but I put my own tweaks on it.
I was just going to give that one to you.
I was just going to give it
Credit where credit is due.
I was just going to give it to you. I was like, yeah,
I was trained by
Chris,
I was trained by one of the best in the business, and that was like you said, the buyer's questionnaire. Essentially any buyer that I work with, I send that over to them.
Yeah.
And there's some basic questions like how many bedrooms do you need, how many bathrooms do you need, what cities are you interested in living in, but then there's some other questions that kind of
Are you allergic to peanuts?
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah.
Or do you want us to find out any extra details, such as
anything spooky?
proximity to a graveyard? Has anybody ever passed away in the unit? Because these aren't things that, they're not material latent defects that would actually affect the value of a property.
It's emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But some people, that's a definite no-no. So it's nice for a real estate agent. I mean, we've got a lot of things to consider.
Yeah.
It's nice to see right away, hey, this is something that these guys won't be okay with. So it's my job to ask, because we're likely not just going to be told. When somebody puts up a listing, it doesn't say, hey, welcome to our strata property and somebody just died in the unit. Like, they're not going to say that.
That's
right.
right.
So,
Yeah. It would kill the mood.
Yes.
yeah, would definitely kill the vibe a little bit.
So you checked this questionnaire,
Yeah.
and what did you do next? Like, what did it say? What did you do?
So I could see that it wasn't an issue for these particular buyers, which I knew. I mean, I didn't have 20 clients on the go. It was my first deal, so I was very careful. I knew exactly.
Intimate.
Scaling.
We found them the perfect home, and it took a while. But so I reassured myself that this wasn't an issue for them on the buyer's questionnaire. Made the phone call. And fortunately for me, they were, extremely understanding about it. The husband actually made a joke, and he said, "Hey, you know what? That's fine. Halloween's my favorite time of the year, so we can. We can have some pretty cool Halloween parties. I'll tell some ghost stories." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, thank God." But yeah, they were really okay about it, and they understood that wasn't going to affect the use of the property.
For them,
it had been nicely renovated. Market value remains what it was. I mean, for some people that would not work and it would not be okay. Fortunately for these guys, it was. In hindsight, I mean, we're not going to go to every single property and be like, hey, did somebody die in this house?
Right.
Hey, did somebody die in this house? But it is important to find out, which buyers that's an important issue for and follow up as needed.
This is a really good reminder that some people are totally fine with it. Like, they're completely fine with it.
Yeah.
But back to Chris's point, you got to know your client. You got to ask those questions ahead of time, because the last thing you would want to have happen is have Chris having to make that phone call, say he checks his buyer questionnaire, turns out that no, they weren't okay with that for whatever reason, say it didn't get looked at, and then they get that phone call saying that they are having to purchase that home. So I've never heard of that happening to anyone. I'm sure it has happened. And I'm glad that you take the extra steps to make sure that your clients are looked after in that regard.
Yeah.
So I want to get into like a scenario with you. And keep in mind, guys, every scenario that we put on this show is a real scenario. Okay. It is a real scenario from our real estate life.
Names and identities may have been changed for legal reasons.
Yes.
But enjoy.
Yeah. We do change a lot of the details to make sure that client confidentiality is always kept.
Yeah.
So here we go. Chris, are you ready?
Let's do it.
Okay. Your client is an older lady, and her husband's ashes were spread in her planters. He loved to garden. She wishes to take the planters and some of the soil in the garden with her to her new home because she had put his ashes everywhere.
This is a true story.
What do you do?
He
All right.
doubts us.
Well,
Like, what do you do? What do you do if she says to you, Chris, I'm good to list, but just so you know, I need to take some of the soil with me and the planters because my husband's ashes are in the yard.
so I think I know the answer for sure, and it's for two reasons from both sides. I would say that this needs to be dealt with prior to listing the home, and we got to get that out of there. Main reason for the buyers, if they found that out, I mean that's not a super sexy situation to run into.
No.
Yeah.
And then the other thing for the sellers, I mean, anytime you're selling a property, there's certain things that come with the property that are going to be
Right.
expected, like your
Yeah.
appliances, your fridge, your stove, your dishwasher, fixtures, like any cabinets. But ultimately, anything is up for discussion. You know,
Yeah.
if somebody says, "Hey, I love your painting," we'd like that to be included in the contract. At the end of the day, the seller always has the end decision to say yes or no. But what happens if you get a Godfather offer and, an offer the seller can't refuse, but it includes these planters?
I love that. Let's just pause for a second. A Godfather offer.
I want one of those.
I've never heard this term before, and
No.
now I'm using it. Do you
I
mind
mean-
if I'll
Of course, it's
quote
yours
you
to
there?
have,
That's
yeah.
great.
If you
Oh
learned
my
something
gosh.
today, I'm glad it was
No,
that.
I think everyone learned something today, and now we're gonna call it
Yeah.
a Godfather offer.
Enough
Yeah.
you can't refuse.
So, I mean, ultimately, yeah, there's going to be no offer that will be good enough probably
That's right.
to give away those ashes, but why put yourself in a situation where you have to have a discussion like, oh shucks, like,
Yeah.
like as the agent, it's like, this is a great offer, but now we got to go back and deal with this stuff that shouldn't have been an issue in the first place.
Yeah.
Had we just safely removed those ashes from the property, got them somewhere safe, and like I said, it's not desirable for either side for those reasons, I would say.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So again, it's just taking care of the client's priorities
Yeah.
prior to, so that it doesn't come up in the conversation. Okay, so I love that. And yeah, you'd have to do that ahead of time, because if a buyer did come through and they were like, "Oh, we want these planters," you wouldn't want to be like, "You don't."
It comes
want
in the
them."
offer. You just scratch it out. No
about
explanation.
those.
No.
No, you do not want.
You don't want
those.
those.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. That's really good. Okay, so say like most people understand, and if you did have something like that, like we've had properties that have had memorial plants before.
Yeah.
People are generally really understanding, right? Because there is emotional connections to plants sometimes.
Yeah, big time. Like this is a sprout that we got from my grandpa's house, and we don't have that anymore. And this is like a little continuation, and
Yes.
we're gonna pick it up and take it with us to our next place. So it's important to them.
Yeah, it's very important. And I think that's always like knowing your audience, especially your seller, would be really important. And I'm pretty sure anyone buying wouldn't want that anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like they wouldn't want the soil if they knew. Not that you would ever have to disclose it, but if they did know, they wouldn't want it. So if you were to take that out ahead of time, I think you're kind of at that point doing everybody a favor.
Yeah.
Right?
Agreed.
Okay, are you ready for scenario number 2?
Let's go.
Okay, here we go. You're assisting a buyer in a really busy market. Prices are climbing daily and everything is going into bidding wars. And we've done this, Chris, right? Like you've been in that market.
Yeah, that sounds like pretty much last year up until about February. So,
Yeah. So you're well versed in like this scenario.
Yes.
Your client wants to write an offer on the perfect home located across the street from a permanent park. You help your buyer secure the place and they get it. Only to realize that the park space across the street,
So calm, so peaceful.
so quiet, because it's a graveyard. And now your client is very upset. What is your initial reaction?
Is that graveyard existing, or does it become a graveyard at some point after?
It's existing.
Oh, there's headstones.
You know what? Even, some of them don't even have headstones. They
Yeah,
just
you're
have those
right.
little like lawn
The
plaques.
little ones, because you can't even
So
see
you
them.
can't tell. And
Yeah.
it's nice and quiet and calm. And you know that market where people only had like 15 minutes to check out a house, and maybe it was at night.
Yep.
It sounds like an
100%.
easy answer because, but like you said, it's busy market. You maybe just saw 10 homes that day. Maybe you wrote an offer on 3 others and missed out. And
Right.
yeah, no, that could easily get missed. That's a good point. It seems so obvious, hey, it's there, but yeah, what do I do? Well,
What would your initial reaction be?
phew.
Because deposit check's in, man. Like deposit check is in.
Yeah, I mean, there'd be
hard
some
one.
guilt and embarrassment, I think. But I mean, we would refer back to that buyer's questionnaire that we talked about, and just check on there and see if that was something that was missed, and if it was, then shame on me. But at the same time, yeah, that's because I've kind of been in that situation before with the buyer's questionnaire and the death situation. I feel like I would be checking that beforehand.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Having an in-depth conversation.
It's very rare that box gets ticked, and when it does, you gotta know, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's just on your mind when you're with those guys. Not that it makes them different in any way. It's just something that needs to be ingrained. It's like if you're dealing with somebody who's has a cat and you're going into a strata that doesn't allow cats, then what are you doing, right? So you just got to know. But mistakes happen too, I guess, right? So.
Yeah. I mean, this is obviously a wild situation. I imagine, that would be like the worst case scenario. But this all comes down to knowing your buyer. Asking the right questions when you're putting in that offer. Why even put in that offer unless you know? And we've had clients that are saying, hey, I don't want to buy something haunted. I get that so much. I get that more than anything.
Yes.
I get that more than proximity to old folks' homes or graveyards. I get that, more than...
Which is so surprising.
Yes, but I do. I get it. And I always know. I say, hey, we're going to write an offer. My clients just want me to ask, is the house haunted?
Is there a definition of what would be considered haunted? Like what makes it haunted?
You can find books, like there's homes in Guildford where like a little girl is seen playing in the front yard, and it's like documented.
If you go on a haunted walk, they say 3 independent accounts.
Yes, it's 3 independent accounts where the people don't know each other.
Yeah.
And then they verify the facts. That's how they do the haunted walk in Fort Langley. Like in Fort Langley, they have a lot of material there.
Yes, I heard about that.
Yeah, which is really neat. I suggest anybody who's shopping in that area, just liking ghost stories, go to that.
Yes.
Learn about the neighborhood, especially before you buy there. So I think it's knowing your audience. And like you said, you probably would have asked that question. So hopefully that never even would have happened in the first place. Okay. Have you ever had a seller or buyer pass away during a transaction? And if this is a sore subject, I apologize in advance.
No worries. Not personally a client of mine, but there was a deal last year where we were purchasing a property which was vacant at the time. I believe the sellers had moved on to a 55 plus or something like that. And there was a bit of an issue with the closing because they had to transfer everything to one of the 2 sellers. And it was unfortunate because the lady had passed away. I didn't ask any details, but that would be the closest thing to anybody passing away during a transaction. I think it happened early on enough that they were able to sort out the paperwork and everything where it didn't delay the completion. But I imagine that could cause some hiccups if it was, closer to, or it was a short closing period, then you might have some issues. But yeah.
Okay. We definitely had that. We've had it a couple times. I was once at a table with an older gentleman, and at one point during him filling, and he was awesome. Like he was at the table, he was filling out the paperwork
With it.
Oh yeah, he was like with it. And I remember him going like stopping and breathing out and closing his eyes and leaning forward. And I thought he died at the table.
Oh my God.
I was like, oh my God, he died. And then he just and came back, and I was like, so he was in his 90s, and I was horrified. Jeremy's laughing because he's picturing, and if you're watching this, you can see kind of like the motions that I'm making, because he really slunk down in this old man, and he burst open, and I was like, oh my goodness. And I had to actually have the conversations with the kids, who are adults at this time, being like, hey, are provisions in place in case the dad doesn't make the sale?
Completion.
Yeah, and they did have signing authority and all the rest, because he was so much older. But I legitimately thought that he passed away in front of me.
Oh my goodness!
It was mortifying, especially because I had to act cool after that. I was like, "Oh, great, yep, just sign here," and I'm like, "Oh my god!" Like which
my eyes would have bugged out of my head. You can play these off really well and stay calm. Not so for me.
Yeah, it was crazy, and we just had one recently and it was really sad because my clients are buying a family home, and this man took us through the property, and he showed us where, Sally skinned her knee, and the rugby team slept over, and the garden that he planted, and the palm tree that he planted, and all these like really crazy personal details. And we really liked him, and
very personable.
So personable. And the next week they were supposed to go house hunting. I know, because we wanted to view the property. They were supposed to go house hunting, him and his wife, and we got a phone call that morning, and he passed away.
Oh man,
it was so sad, and I felt so bad because I could really tell that agent, like, he knew them. He took them for dinner. He spent a lot of time with these people, and he's known them for so long. And we've had clients ourselves pass away, thankfully not during a transaction, but we've read headlines later on that we've had clients that have gone, and and it happens, unfortunately. This is just something that happens, and we have to be prepared, and we have to handle it professionally. And like you said, when it comes to those buyers, you really got to know the questions to ask. So it's good. That's why we establish great communication. We have to understand we have to be sensitive to our clients, be sensitive to agents. We never really know what people are dealing with. Not everyone has a happy way or reason why they're selling. Right? They don't always have a happy sale. Maybe it is because something's happened.
And don't trust every park you see.
And don't trust every park you see. Unless you love quiet neighbors. That's such an easy joke. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for coming out, Chris. I really love that story. I really appreciate that story because it really lets you kind of know the clues now when you see, someone else selling, no property disclosure, the son selling new floors, and I remember when you phoned me when that was happening to you, and I had a good laugh. I was very grateful that you did your due diligence and that you had taken care of your clients so well. So that's everything today.
Yes.
Happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy
Cheers.
Halloween.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Spilling the Tea, a real estate podcast with Kristy Macero and Shelagh Maycheck.